From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, episode 865. I decided to start counting the episodes. Someone on the team yesterday said, we should really start counting these episodes because we've been doing this a long time. So episode 865 of this show. We do the show 4 times a week. We've been doing it for 6 years. So do the math. We've taken some vacation, but 865. Thank you all for tuning in. Packed show for all y'all today. We've got a PostgresSQL Zeroday vulnerability exploitation that's really tied into something really unbelievable. 23andme. The price of data breaches starting to catch up to businesses. Could this be the use case? More Deepseek AI news and a whole lot more on this morning's show. So don't go anywhere, and welcome to Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. I've got my double espresso. Good morning, everyone tuning in. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. A good espresso on a good morning makes everything so much better. Let's get into Rapid7 researchers flagging and discovering a new zero-day vulnerability in the PostgresSQL that appears to have been a critical component in the chain of attacks against the Beyond Trust remote support product. The vulnerability tracked as CVE 2025-10904 affects the PostgresSQL interactive terminal PSQL and allows SQL statements containing untrusted but correctly escaped input to trigger SQL injections. The interesting twist is Rapid7 is directly connecting this exploitation of the PostgresSQL bug to some remote code execution attacks against the Beyond Trust remote support systems, the hacks that have successfully compromised some of the machines at U.S. Treasury. In every scenario examined, Rapid7 researchers say that Beyond Trust exploit CVE 2024-12356 required leveraging this PostgresSQL flaw. Although Beyond Trust has issued patches for its vulnerabilities, including that CV in a separate bug as well, the underlying flaw in Postgres remains a concerning pivot point for attackers. According to Rapid7, the bug exists the way PSQL handles invalid byte sequences from malformed UTF-8 characters. In testing, Rapid7 researchers found that crafted invalid sequences can prematurely terminate a SQL command, allowing attackers to inject additional statements and even trigger some shell executions via PSQL meta command. In control tests, researchers say they were able to inject a command that executed the ID command on the system, confirming the potential full system compromise. The PostgresSQL team released an urgent patch, and warned versions before PostgresSQL 17.3, 16.7, 15.11, 14.6, and 13.19 are all affected. The project did not acknowledge the zero-day exploitation, as if it credited Rapid7. So again, there's always that kind of plot twist there, but you want to make sure you get this patched up as soon as humanly possible. So 23andme, the DNA testing company, is announcing that it's laying off more than 200 people as Chief Executive Anna Wojcicki seeks to stabilize the business that's been losing money. As part of the restructuring, the company said it's closing its drug development arm, which has been conducting human trials for 2 of the company's advanced drug candidates. So 23andme, you were paying them to collect your DNA data. They were then taking that DNA data and they were selling it to drug companies. And they weren't able to make money. And you might ask yourself, what, how, and why? Well, let's get into that for just a second. In 23andme, in October of 2023, suffered a substantial data breach. If you remember, we talked about it right here on the show. 6.9 million customers were impacted by it. The breach was executed through a credential stuffing attack where attackers used previously compromised login credentials to access user accounts. They were able to get personal details like names, birth years, location, and even ancestry information. Notably, the attackers appeared to specifically target individuals of Ashkenazi Jewish and Chinese descent. In response to the breach, multiple lawsuits were filed against 23andme, and by September of last year, the company agreed to a $30 million settlement to resolve a consolidated class action lawsuit. The settlement terms included cash payment to affected customers and 3 years of complimentary access to a privacy and genetic monitoring program. Approximately $25 million of the settlement was expected to be covered by the company's cyber insurance. However, there's been some operational and financial challenges. 23andMe faced significant operational and financial difficulties. In September of 2024, all 7 independent members of the company's board resigned. That coincides with the legal repercussions, meaning cyber insurance may or may not have covered all of this, but if it did, it sure wasn't keeping the board happy. So the board ended up resigning here, right? And the CEO hasn't been able to secure new funding. That's all happening right now. So 23andMe has been doing a whole bunch of layoffs. So 23andMe reported financial results for September quarter early Tuesday. Revenue declined 12% to $44 million, and they had a net loss of $59 million, meaning they're spending more than they earn, like the U.S. government. The company ended the quarter with $127 million of cash, down from $173 months prior. Again, all of these dates coincide with the legal settlements and so forth. The company began layoffs in 2023. It had more than 800 employees. This round of cuts brings it down to just about 300. It's over 50% of its workforce. It's saying that this restructuring would save the company $35 million annually. What they're not saying is how would this impact business? And this goes to kind of the whole idea of how business breaches impact business, maybe not directly, but when you're unsecured, undersecured, or otherwise, you tend to fall victim to these types of situations. And again, now 23andMe is another company we see this happen. If you recall, the data broker also went out of business as well. And again, the data breach was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. It appears that the same is here with 23andMe. Just the cards aren't working right. We never wish for a business to fail. Just want to say that I'm not gloating in the failure here. And I'm not saying, no, I told you so. Cybersecurity has real impact on business. And when your business is trust, when people are entrusting you with their DNA, when people are entrusting you with their family ancestry, with some really, really private information, and you fail to uphold the most basic of standards because you're cutting corners, this is when your customers speak the loudest, your partners speak the loudest as they look at you, and recovery at this point becomes very, very difficult, especially if you weren't doing well beforehand, which was the case with 23andMe. South Korea suspended DeepSeek AI downloads over its app store in the country until privacy changes are made in the app in order to adhere to the Korean data privacy regulations. Downloads were paused as of February 15th at 6 p.m. local time, and the Personal Information Protection Commission said the web service remains accessible. The agency said it commenced its own analysis of DeepSeek after its launch. It identified shortcomings in communication functions and personal information processing. So all in all, DeepSeek is going to have to conform to South Korea privacy laws or axe the country off of its data collection and communist propaganda country list. Folks, today's show is supported by our good friends at Nudge Security. Here's a short video about the great work they're doing to help you with dealing with Gen AI, like DeepSeek, as well as so many other things in your environment. Folks, Nudge Security. Hey, security gang, I'm so happy to welcome back Nudge Security to the show. And let's talk a little bit about identity risks, data security risks, and third-party risks, and what do they all have in common? They're made a whole lot worse by SaaS sprawl. Every new SaaS account adds a new identity to secure a new place where sensitive data could end up and a new vendor risk management assessment you need to complete. Nudge Security addresses those risks at the source, helping you to protect and manage all of your apps, identities, and data anywhere and everywhere where it can happen. It all starts with discovery. Within minutes of starting your free trial, you'll have a full inventory of every SaaS account ever created by anyone in your org, along with insights into authentication methods, app-to-app integrations, vendor risk insights, and more. My team and I did this last summer. It was absolutely mind-boggling what we found. It helped us really kind of put a plan together and start a method of trying to automate security and governance tasks like detecting risks and misconfiguration. It helped us conduct user access reviews and help us offboard employees from specific apps that we didn't even know existed. It freed up our time for a lot more strategic work and vendor security profiles for every app, even Gen AI tools. It helped us do all of that, and it automated it, which I'm a big fan of. Nudge Security is graciously offering everyone a free 14-day trial by going to nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. That's nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. The link is in the show notes as well. Go get your free 14-day trial now. All right, let's continue with the show. A $577 million crypto Ponzi scheme brought two defendants in Estonia to plead guilty. Sergei Potapenko and Ivan Turagin, both 40 years old, pleaded guilty to charges related to their operation of the Hashflare, which was a cryptocurrency fraud mining service. As part of their plea, the defendants have committed to forfeit assets valued at more than $400 million, marking a significant victory for law enforcement. Between 2015 and 2019, Potapenko and Turagin ran Hashflare, selling customer contracts promised a share of the cryptocurrency mined by the service. Cryptocurrency mining, which uses computers to mine crypto. If you don't know what that is, I'll put that in our show notes at cyberhubpodcast.com in our full detail there. Despite not having the capacity to mine the crypto as advertised, the scheme was remarkably profitable, generating more than $577 million in sales. Potapenko and Turagin funneled the proceeds into lavish assets, purchasing real estate, luxury vehicles, and maintaining various cryptocurrency and investment accounts. The impact of the scheme was devastating, hundreds of thousands of victims losing their hard-earned money. The victims who were drawn into the scheme by promises of high returns from crypto mining were left with nothing as the defendants' fraudulent activities continued unchecked for a year. As a result, the forfeited assets valued at over $400 million will now be made available through a remission process, which is expected to help compensate the defrauded investors. That process hasn't been laid out. Both conspirators admitted guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud under U.S. law. They each face up to 20 years in prison. However, the final sentence will be determined by a federal district court judge who will consider various factors, including the U.S. sentencing guidelines before any penalties. Sentencing is scheduled for May 8th of this year. So FBI, key role in here, cryptocurrency fraud, again, $577 million. That's over $500 million. Just so you understand, $500 million. Rule of thumb, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Don't do it. Don't read reviews online. People buy reviews all day long. All day long. Just don't do it. We'll continue with some vulnerabilities now. Vulnerabilities in the Xerox VersaLink malfunctioning printers could allow attackers to retrieve authentication credentials via pass-back attacks targeting LDAP and SMB FTP services, according to Rapid7. The two security defects were identified in the all-in-one enterprise color printers, namely CVE 2024-12510 and 12511. Xerox released security patches for both. The passback attack is when the printer is directed to authenticate against a server controlled by an attacker, who then captures the authentication data sent by the device on a VersaLink printer with the lightweight directory access protocol services configured for authentication. An attacker with access to the configuration page would need to modify the service's IP address, then trigger an LDAP lookup to authenticate against the attacker-controlled server. So you want to make sure you get these patched up. Microsoft is spotting a macOS modular malware emerging in attacks that target user-sensitive information like digital wallets and data from legitimate Node apps. The malware is typically distributed through infected Xcode projects. It's been around for at least 5 years, and each update represents a milestone in the XCSSET development. The current improvements are the first one observed since 2022. Apple tried to fix the vulnerability that was exploited as a zero-day, an indication of new developing capabilities. The new variant that Microsoft saw in the wild has now new obfuscation through encoding techniques that rely on both base64 and XXD methods, two persistent techniques, ZSHRC and DOC, and new Xcode infection methods like target, rule, or forced strategy options to place the payload in the Xcode project. So obviously something to keep in mind there. Researchers have also shed light on a new Golang-based backdoor that uses Telegram as a mechanism for command and control communication. Not the first time we see this happening with Telegram. Telegram is a preferred method for C2 communication for many threat actors, especially those of Russian origin. The malware is complied in Golang and executed. It acts like a backdoor, according to Leonardo Froes, in an analysis that we published last week. Although the malware seems to be still under development, it is completely functional. So something to keep in mind there. What appears to be the more sinister side of romance, and there's a whole bunch of it. In the online world, romance scams are really a pain because they address the most vulnerable part of what makes us human, love. And when people abuse love, they tend to drive people down a really bad path from a mental health perspective. Obviously, we've seen what they do with teenagers. There's a whole bunch of this stuff. I've been trying to work on a story here around what some of these romance scams in Nigeria do to teenagers through catfishing, being able to acquire intimate photos of teenagers or young adults, and then blackmailing them for money. Some teenagers and young adults have actually taken their own life as a result of this scam. Some of these Nigerian threat actors have been brought to the U.S. to face punishment for their crime. But according to Chain Analysis, they're saying these scams in which fraudsters approach their victims on dating apps or site, they groom them literally like that to give them money to invest in a supposed business venture in their home country. The number of people losing money this way increased by 210% year over year, probably because more scams are circulating. Many of these are running out of compounds in Southeast Asia, where some staffers are being held against their will and forced to do this type of work, and showing you just the price of what's happening in cybercrime and just how lucrative it is. Cybercrime is the third largest economy on the planet behind the US and China. So just let that sink in, that there's so much money in it, right? And the world cannot sustain it. And it's a world battle. I'm not going to go through the whole world thing about cyber because I don't think the whole world wants to address this. I think some countries like their population being taken advantage of because it makes them more reliant on government. And when they're more reliant on government, they're less likely to overthrow that rule. I'm looking at you, China. I'm looking at you, Russia. I'm looking at you, Iran. And I'm looking at you, North Korea, as well as Venezuela and many others. So there's that. Google, for their end, as we end today's show, are working to enhance the security of its mobile operating system, focusing on preventing scammers from exploiting certain phone features during calls. One key feature that Android 16 aims to block is action like sideloading apps or enabling accessibility access during an active phone call, both of which are commonly used by scammers to gain control of the victim devices. So really good thought here by Google, by the way, and you can read the full story, but I just want to give you the whole thing. We're finally starting to look at security problems from a human perspective and not a system perspective. How are they doing it? How do we stop it? What are the features we can put in place? And how do we support to make sure that people don't have this happen to them? And this is exactly what Google's doing here. It's effective. It's good. I'm glad they're doing it. This is a refreshing way. We'll see how well it works. Once it does this, Android 16 is supposed to prevent users from being able to change certain sensitive settings while they're on a call. Two of the most targeted settings, again, sideloading app and enabling accessibility access. So we'll see. This is now in beta. So if you've got an Android and you're testing this, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to get feedback from all of you on any of these. And if you know any romance scams that are willing to talk off the record about it, would really like to talk to them. I'm working on an article for my Saturday series around just what's going on with these romance scams, as well as helping build some level of just a one-pager to help people deal with them from a mental health perspective, as well as from a recovery. That's it for our show today. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Make sure to comment, subscribe. Let me know what coffee you're drinking. Also, if you're testing this Android 16 and you're testing this feature, please let me know. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or on X at The Real James Azar. Until then, have a great rest of your day, y'all. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.